There comes a moment when your old life no longer fits. Your beliefs crack, your relationships shift, and everything familiar feels strangely foreign. Most people think they're breaking down, but this isn't collapse. This is the beginning of awakening. Alan Watts said it best. You cannot grow without shedding the shell that once protected you. What feels like losing everything is actually you meeting yourself for the first time. When growth hurts, the lobster that must break its shell. Here is the kind of person most people misunderstand. The one who suddenly feels like their entire life doesn't fit anymore. This is the beginning of a transformation, not a breakdown. And nothing illustrates it better than the image of a lobster shedding its shell. A lobster grows until its hard shell becomes unbearably tight. Inside, pressure builds, discomfort increases. Staying in the old shell becomes impossible. And so, at its most vulnerable moment, soft, exposed, defenseless, the lobster breaks the shell and steps out. If it refuses, it dies. If it sheds, it grows. Humans are no different. When your beliefs, relationships, identity, or career become too small for who you're becoming, the pressure builds. Restlessness, emptiness, frustration, a sense of being trapped. These are not flaws. They are signals, signs that the old layer of your life can no longer contain the person you are becoming. Look at the real-world examples. You leave a religion you grew up with. Your family thinks you're lost. You quit your corporate job. Friends whisper you've gone crazy. You stop chasing material status. Others say you lost ambition. But none of that is true. What they see as collapse is simply you outgrowing the old shell they're still living in. Psychology calls this the threshold stage of identity transformation, the moment between the old self and the emerging one. Alan Watts puts it perfectly. If the lobster refuses to shed its shell, it cannot grow. It will remain stunted. This stage feels dangerous because it is dangerous. You are exposed. You don't have a new identity yet. You don't have explanations for others. You don't have certainty. And because the world mistrusts anything it doesn't recognize, people may criticize or resist your change. But here is the truth. The danger is necessary. The vulnerability is the doorway. The discomfort is the sign you're evolving, not failing. Men fail most often here. They think the discomfort means go back, when in fact, it means breakthrough. You don't grow by strengthening the old shell. You grow by daring to leave it behind. Outgrowing others doesn't make you superior. It makes you different. Here is where most people fail. They mistake awakening for superiority. When you begin to see through the illusions society lives inside, the ego loves to whisper, I'm above them now. I'm more awakened. I understand what they don't. But that is simply the old ego wearing new spiritual clothing. The truth is far less glamorous. You are not better. You are just seeing differently. Before awakening, you played the same game everyone else plays. Status, achievement, social approval, competition, proving your worth. After awakening, something shifts. Those goals no longer taste the same. The pursuit feels hollow because you finally recognize it. A collective script written by people who were also following someone else's script. You didn't become superior. You simply stopped acting. Just imagine. Your old friends still care deeply about promotions, luxury purchases, reputation, who's dating who and who's earning more. You used to care too until one day you woke up and realized the scoreboard was invented. You walked off the field, but they stayed. And this is where people misunderstand you. They think you're judging them. They think you're rejecting their way of life. Some even believe you've become arrogant, but in truth, you're simply not playing the same game anymore. Alan Watts said it clearly. You've stepped out of the agreed-upon framework of reality, while they remain comfortably within it. Psychology calls this differentiation, the ability to see your identity as separate from the collective. It's not pride, it's clarity. But men often make a serious mistake here. They start preaching. They try to wake others up. They argue, debate, and push spiritual insight onto people who never asked for it. And when someone resists, they think, see, I'm ahead of them. That is the trap, the spiritual ego. The real marker of growth is not feeling superior. It's feeling quiet. You no longer need to convince anyone. You no longer need to be understood. You no longer need validation for your insight. Outgrowing others doesn't mean you rose above them. It only means you're walking a path that no longer matches theirs, living in two worlds at once and belonging fully to neither. This is where things become unmistakably strange. You start existing in two different worlds, and neither one fully fits you anymore. On one side is the world everyone recognizes, the marketplace world. Careers, money, marriage, promotions, plans, reputations, achievements, expectations. On the other side is the inner world that has awakened within you, the world of presence, consciousness, impermanence, and deeper truth. You now speak two languages. The language of form calendars, deadlines, bills, responsibilities, and the language of formlessness awareness, stillness, freedom, the nature of mind. The problem? Almost no one around you speaks both. A simple family dinner becomes a perfect example. Your mother asks, "When are you getting married?" But your mind quietly whispers, "Who is this me who's supposed to get married? And why is that the default storyline?" You smile politely because you know they won't understand the real answer. Or your friends talk about buying a bigger house, and you find yourself thinking, a house doesn't define a life. None of this is permanent. You don't say it out loud because it would only create confusion or conflict. Alan Watts described this beautifully. You must learn to be in the world, but not of it. Psychology refers to this as liminality, the in-between state where the old reality no longer holds you, but the new reality hasn't fully materialized. Men often struggle here. They feel disconnected, too awake to enjoy superficial conversations, too normal to disappear into caves and monasteries, too aware to fully buy into society's script, too human to completely transcend it. And this is where most people fail. They try to force themselves back into the old world to fit in, to be normal, to stop feeling weird. But you cannot unsee what you've seen. You cannot unknow what you've realized. You cannot shrink back into the shell you outgrew. Walking between two worlds is not a mistake. It is the bridge stage of awakening. You're not lost. You're transitioning. When people sense you're awakening, they try to pull you back or push you away. This is the stage nobody warns you about. When you awaken, people around you don't stay neutral. They react often strongly. Your transformation disrupts the roles they've assigned to you. And instead of seeing your growth, they experience it as instability. And humans defend their comfort zones with surprising intensity. Some will try to pull you back into the version of yourself they're familiar with. They say things like, "You've changed," or "You used to be fun," or "Why are you acting so distant?" But underneath the words is a quieter message. Please go back to being the person who made me comfortable. Maybe you stopped chasing money, so they conclude you lost ambition. Maybe you stopped gossiping, so they think you're acting superior. Maybe you stopped overspending, so they accuse you of being boring. The truth is simple. They weren't attached to you. They were attached to the old role you played in their story. Others will quietly drift away. Invitations slow down. Conversations stay shallow. They stop asking you to join outings because, to them, your new presence feels unfamiliar, not threatening, just unsettling. When frequencies shift, some people can no longer hear your wavelength. The distance isn't personal, it's energetic. Then there are the ones who become hostile. This happens when your awakening contradicts their identity. Leave a religion, and suddenly you're lost. Leave a political ideology, and you're a traitor. Stop participating in their habits, and they assume you're silently judging them. You're not, but your authenticity exposes their illusions, and that alone feels like an attack. As Alan Watts said, your very existence becomes a threat to those who still believe. What they fear isn't you. It's the reflection you unintentionally hold up the truth they're not ready to face. The real tragedy is that many men mistake this resistance as a sign they're going the wrong way. In reality, it's proof they're shedding the shell that no longer fits. When people react to your awakening, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're becoming whole, and wholeness doesn't fit inside anyone else's script. Living a double life will destroy you from the inside. Here is the painful truth most awakened people eventually learn. Pretending to be your old self is far more exhausting than becoming your new one. When your inner world transforms, but your outer world stays the same, you start living a double life, and that double life slowly kills your spirit. On the surface, you still talk about the things everyone else talks about: money, promotions, relationships, gossip, weekend plans. You nod, you smile, you participate just enough to blend in. But inside, you know none of it feels real anymore. You feel like an actor performing a character you've already outgrown. The conversations drain you because every sentence pulls you back into a shell you've already shed. You go out drinking with old friends, pretending you care about who's dating who or who bought a new car. You laugh at jokes that don't land in your heart anymore. You wear opinions like costumes. And when you get home, you feel a hollow ache. You can't explain a sense of betraying yourself just to stay acceptable. This internal split is dangerous. Alan Watts described it perfectly. You become like someone who's discovered treasure, but is too afraid to spend it. You found something precious: clarity, awareness, authenticity. But you hide it because you fear losing people, upsetting the familiar order, or being judged as strange. So you shrink yourself to fit back into a life that no longer belongs to you. The problem is, every time you pretend, a little part of you dies. Integrity bleeds away. Energy drains. Anxiety grows. Your body feels heavy because it's carrying a truth your mouth refuses to speak. Living two versions of yourself, one real, one performative, creates spiritual suffocation. And here is where most men fail. They think keeping both worlds alive is the safe option. It isn't. It's the slowest form of self-destruction. You don't lose people by being authentic. You lose the people who were attached to your mask. And that is not a loss. It's liberation. You cannot evolve while pretending nothing has changed. The cost of hiding your truth is always higher than the cost of living it. The loneliness between two lives. Your dark night of the soul. This is the stage almost everyone fears, yet no one can avoid. The profound loneliness that comes after you've left your old life, but before your new one has arrived. It feels like floating in empty space, no longer the person you were, not yet the person you're becoming. This is the true dark night of the soul, and it is one of the most misunderstood phases of awakening. Everything familiar begins to dissolve. The friends you once resonated with now feel distant. The ambitions that once motivated you lose their power. The structures that held your identity collapse. And suddenly, you find yourself asking silent questions at 3 a.m. Where do I belong now? What am I becoming? Am I losing my mind? People often mistake this phase for depression, burnout, or personal failure. But Alan Watts offered a much deeper interpretation. It's the passage between the old life and the new, the death of the caterpillar before the emergence of the butterfly. In this transition, you might long for your old ignorance, that simpler version of life where you believed the stories society told you. You might even try to force yourself back into your old job, your old routines, your old relationships, just to feel grounded again. But nothing fits, nothing clicks, nothing feels like home anymore. And that is the exact sign that the transformation is real. You are shedding an identity that once defined you. Of course, it feels like dying because part of you is. This isn't psychological collapse. It's spiritual metamorphosis. The self you used to perform is dissolving, and your deeper self hasn't fully stepped forward. That void, that emptiness, that disorientation, it is not a mistake. It's the necessary space in which your new life grows. Men often fail here because they panic. They rush back to comfort, familiarity, and external validation. They try to fill the emptiness with distractions, relationships, addictions, or busyness. But emptiness isn't meant to be filled. It's meant to be felt. Loneliness during awakening is not abandonment. It is initiation. You are not lost. You are transitioning into a life that finally matches your inner truth. When you finally let go of the old world, new people appear like magic. There is a moment on the awakening path when something subtle but powerful shifts. You stop trying to be understood by the people from your old life. You stop explaining yourself. You stop defending your changes. You stop hoping they'll get it. And the instant you release that need, the universe opens a new door, often quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. This is one of the great paradoxes of transformation. Your new tribe cannot appear until you stop clinging to the old one. For months, even years, you may feel like you're walking alone. You drift away from the people you used to spend weekends with. Their conversations no longer nourish you. Their values no longer resonate. Their fears no longer make sense. You aren't judging them. You're simply no longer vibrating where they are. But as long as you try to keep them comfortable, or try to keep yourself small just to stay connected, you block the people who are meant for this next stage. The moment you finally surrender, the moment you admit, yes, I'm different now, and that's okay, something extraordinary happens. You begin to encounter people who speak your inner language without explanation. Sometimes they appear in meditation groups, retreat circles, or silent retreats. Sometimes it's a stranger who drops a sentence that feels like it was spoken directly to your soul. Sometimes it's a random online comment that feels like home. And sometimes it's someone who enters your life with the strange familiarity of meeting an old friend you somehow forgot. Alan Watts described this beautifully. You find them when you're ready. When your loneliness becomes acute enough, it's not punishment. It's preparation. The acute loneliness shapes you, stretches you, softens you, and makes you available for deeper connection. Because the new people won't bond with your mask, they'll bond with your essence. And essence only appears when the old identities fall away. Letting go doesn't create emptiness. It creates space. And that space is where the people aligned with your new life finally enter. Losing your old life is how you finally meet yourself. This is the conclusion most people never see coming. The awakening journey doesn't give you more. It takes almost everything away, not as punishment, but as purification. The friends who no longer resonate, the identities that no longer fit, the beliefs that no longer comfort you, the ambitions that no longer drive you, they all fall away. And for a while, it feels like your entire world is collapsing. But look closer. What you're actually losing is every illusion you once mistook for yourself. You lose the approval of people who only loved the old version of you. You lose the safety of identities that kept you small. You lose the comfort of belonging to groups whose beliefs you've outgrown. You lose the numbness that protected you from truth. And yes, it hurts. It feels like standing in the ruins of the life you spent years building. It feels like betrayal, loss, abandonment, exile. But then something miraculous happens. In the silence that follows the collapse, a deeper presence begins to emerge you. Without roles, without masks, without the expectations of others weaving your identity for you. Alan Watts said it with brutal clarity. What you gain is yourself, your true self. You are only losing illusions. And he was right. You realize you no longer fear being misunderstood because you no longer fear being alone. You no longer chase validation because you no longer doubt your own worth. You no longer hide behind personas because you no longer need to impress anyone. The person who finally steps out of the wreckage is someone you hadn't met in years, or perhaps ever. A self that is whole, grounded, authentic, and untouchable. Men often fail right before this point. They panic and run back to the familiar, to old relationships, old habits, old environments, just to avoid the discomfort of rebirth. But those who stay, those who endure the loneliness and the uncertainty long enough, discover something priceless. Losing the world is how you finally come home to yourself. This is not a tragedy. It is the greatest trade you will ever make. Awakening strips away every illusion you once clung to. The roles, the expectations, the identities, the people who needed you small. And when all of that falls away, something remains, you unmasked and unmistakably real. As Alan Watts wrote, what you lose are illusions. What remains is yourself. You didn't fail, you evolved. And the life that matches who you truly are begins now.